back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie, and it's National Cuddle Day today, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
That's what we were talking about earlier on in the programme. Martin demonstrated a cuddle with our touch therapist, which she very much enjoyed. Paul's been in touch. I think she enjoyed it too, to be fair. Yeah. She was really clinging on there. It went on for a long time.
Yeah, got a bit
Paul says, Martin Daubney hugging, I am howling, ha ha ha.
Well, I'm glad that you're entertained, because I tell you what Karen here wasn't. Karen says, hugging is definitely working on Martin. I'd hug him any day. Karen, my DMs are open. I can't say that, can I?
No, I don't think you're allowed to say that.
The thing is, it was good fun, and I think these kind of funny stories lift the mood, because there's all strikes and doom and gloom and COVID. I think it's a bit... You're
right. And it is breakfast at the end of the day. We want to wake up with a smile. Not so much if you're looking at the papers, though, this morning. You might be thinking, spare us. These are the revelations in Harry's new book. Lots of you getting in touch. It's Getting You speaking this morning. Nicola in Norwich has made a really good point. Good morning to you, Nicola, who says, I really have no words as to the appalling way that Harry has monetised intensely personal and private family matters, which is ironic given the case that he pursued when Thomas Markle shared a letter from Meghan with the press. I think that's a really good point there.
And John is brutal and to the point here. He says, I can't believe how thick Harry is. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the end of his point. On the subject of NHS pay rises, the Royal College of Nursing are prepared to meet the government halfway, go for 10%. I put that to Pat McFadden earlier. Would Labour go for that? He wouldn't commit. But Jason says 10% is still far too high. Who's going to pay for it? Spend the extra on more staff. 10% is simply unaffordable. So what do I know?
And back on Harry's claim, just to finish, David has been in touch. Good morning to you, David, saying it's utterly disgusting that a member of the British royal family should openly boast, he says, about the killing of 25 Taliban fighters. These revelations, all for monetary gain, but then whinge about being flawed by his brother. But something totally different from Jim, who says, I think killing 25 enemy in combat is one thing we should be proud of Prince Harry for. They don't make us a target for terrorism anyway. I think the Taliban already know that we killed a lot of them, regardless of what Harry says. It's a different point, isn't it? Let us know what you think. They just keep on coming. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
OK, let's dive inside the papers now. Joining us this morning, my favourite, that's not true, sorry, Fraser, Liz Kershaw.
Your favourite.
Liz Kershaw, my old sparring partner of many years gone past.
You just want another hug, don't you, right?
In a minute.
He's edging in for one,
Fraser Myers from Spies, if you want a hug, mate, you can have one too. Let's start with you, Liz. Britain's hottest ever year. Climate change or just weather?
Well, I'm just talking about the journalism here. It really is bugging me. And I just want to talk, first, not about the science, about the facts and correctness and truth. And average temperatures of 10 Celsius made 2022 Britain's hottest ever year.
Yeah.
I can't say, baloney. It's just not true. It might be, by calculations, the hottest year since 1850.
Since records began.
Since comparably scientific records were started, which was 1850.
Yeah.
And so that headline is just not true.
Because it was hotter like 1,000 years ago.
It was hotter in Roman times, it was hotter in medieval times. We've had hot summers, you know, down the centuries, down the decades. It's just not true. That's my bugbear, and it's used in a very irresponsible way.
I hear people shouting now, climate change denier.
I'm not denying that the climate is changing. It always has. I don't know if it's to do with human activity. I have never been, and I would love to see a programme on, you know, somebody responsible, like the BBC, sort of 6-part documentary series, instead of showing cute tigers, you know, little lions prancing around, you know. Instead of that, I'd like to see an authoritative, investigative, factual series examining the data, the data we have now, and the data. When the data's been recovered from, it's in the British Library. They found it, they unearthed it. Amateurs from like 1604, etc., who collected wind speeds and rainfall, and that's not even included in this. So just very quickly, it's a model that they've used to come up with this, and they've said that if you take out man's activity In a natural climate, this temperature of 10 Celsius would occur every 500 years. So never mind taking out human activity. When I spent a day at the University of Reading Climate Change Department, after making a comment on Sky News, they invited me there for the day, and they showed me all this data, and I went, well, where's Krakatoa on there? What? I said 1865 Krakatoa. It led to a kind of nuclear winter
because of all the ash in the air.
Ash and the famine and freezing temperatures. And the same thing happened just before the French Revolution. It caused.
But let's let Fraser get a word in there.
Sorry.
Fraser, you will know that being accused of being a climate change denier is up there with being a racist or a transphobe.
Well, yeah, I mean, the denier phrase is deliberately used to echo Holocaust denial, right? I mean, it's there to sort of shame people from asking any pertinent questions. The key thing here is not whether the temperature is rising. I think that's probably true. But, what's the context? What does that actually mean for humanity? And so, 2022 might have been the hottest year on record in the UK. But we've had another year of absolutely astronomically low deaths from climate change. One of the good news stories that isn't talked about is that we are getting so much better at adapting to the natural environment, to adapting to what the weather is throwing at us, that, fewer people are dying. Even the economic cost of kind of climate-related incidents is going down every year. That's the context that always gets ignored. This is why all the environmental predictions turn out wrong, by the way. It's not necessarily because they're based on, bad science at the time, but they always neglect to think about how humans will respond, to think about how clever we are actually at adapting to the natural world.
We are top of the food chain for a reason. We can adapt and survive. Let's move on. A bit of politics. Back to Starmer. This is about him scrapping. Sorry, this is the devolution of power. This is the Take Back Control bill.
Yeah. So the headlines are all talking about Keir Starmer adopting that phrase from the referendum, taking back control.
He's got a brass neck to adopt that phrase, don't you?
It's pretty extraordinary. Keir Starmer, one of the most vociferous campaigners for Remain, probably the person who played the biggest role in getting Labour to adopt a kind of second referendum position.
Headed up the People's Vote campaign to get to Brexit.
The so-called People's Vote. I don't know why the first vote wasn't a People's Vote. I don't know who. I think I'm a person. I voted in it. And it's interesting. In the Eye, it mentions the fact that he is refusing to comment on how a Labour government would relate to the EU. Whether there would be a kind of softening of relations, whether we'd move a line closer to the single market, which would obviously be a huge betrayal of Brexit. So he's kind of speaking out of two sides of his mouth. His version of taking back control is devolution, giving more powers to kind of metro mayors and local authorities.
Who'd probably be Labour mayors.
Probably, but I mean, whoever they are, I mean, a lot of people don't know their metro mayor or their local councillors. People are not particularly engaged in local politics. So I don't really, and it's mainly to do with bins and buses and things like that. So I don't actually buy the idea that giving powers away from Westminster to local areas is necessarily a positive or more democratic thing. It can be, but I don't believe that that's Starmer's intentions.
Yeah.
Liz, what do you make of that then? Starmer wrapping himself in a Brexit cloak, but he is a strong
It's very cynical, and I think he's just thinks that which is patronising to people in Wigan and Rochdale and places, pretend you're giving them the equivalent of the Scottish Parliament or the Northern Ireland Assembly and they'll vote for me. I do think that some mayors have done great stuff. Look how Andy Burnham has empowered the people of the North West.
But then the mayor in Bristol was a disaster. I'm being told we have to move on. I'm sorry, Liz. So sorry, Fraser. We'll have more in the next hour. Please come back then. Thank you.